Good morning, everyone. This is Nicole Lee Mwanda, and Tasheen Stallings is with me as well. And we are so excited to present to you all the end of the year McKinney-Vento procedures. Um, we are both with the Homeless Education Program here at OSSE, and just wanted to go over some information with you all to ensure that everyone has the guidance that you need to wrap up the school year. I know it's been a very exciting school year for each of you, and we just want to be sure that we're providing you with the appropriate guidance to close out the school year for your homeless education programs at your respective schools and LEAs. First, we're going to go over what the objective is for the day. And before I start that, I want to go over some just brief housekeeping information. So right now, everyone is muted. If you have any questions, please type it in the chat box and let us know if you have questions, and we'll be answering your questions as we go along with the webinar. And I also have provided enough time towards the end of the session to answer any lingering questions you may have. But first, the objectives for today. We will be reviewing the federal policies and procedures that guide the protocol for capturing homeless student data in the McKinney-Vento QuickBase application and in general for your programs. We're also going to be describing appropriate strategies for archiving your McKinney-Vento records and storing your supplies, and also identifying various resources and opportunities for students and families experiencing homelessness during the summer. For the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, hopefully, now that we're at the end of the school year, many of you are well versed in this information, but we ultimately wanted to go over a little bit of this information again, because some of you are newer to the role and may have transitioned into the role towards the end of the school year. Basically, under McKinney-Vento, we in the district utilize the housing status categories when families are experiencing homelessness as the following. If families are identified as living in a sheltered living situation, that's typically when parents or guardians are living in emergency or transitional shelters. This could be that the families have been placed in an emergency shelter or in one of the hotels by Virginia Williams Family Resource Center. That could be in DC, that could also be in Maryland. And as many of you are well aware, there's still families currently still residing in Maryland hotels. But because those placements in the shelters and the hotels are done by Virginia Williams, they are considered, the hotels themselves are considered to be overflow shelters, and therefore they would not be considered by the district government to be a hotel placement because it's placement. Typically, when you have families that identify as living in a hotel motel, the most appropriate way to categorize those families would be those that are paying for themselves to stay in hotels or motels, or have been placed by Red Cross because they were burned out of their home, or they have been placed in a hotel motel by some other agency other than for emergency shelter purposes. They could also be paying for themselves to stay in the hotels. The other two categories that we also use is doubled up for families that are in a shared housing situation where they're staying with a family or a friend and they are in that housing situation because they lost their housing or faced economic hardship and had to go stay with someone else. Unsheltered is basically none of the other categories, and it's a non-permanent housing situation where it is absolutely typically not habitable and considered an appropriate nighttime residency, such as their car, a laundromat. In those situations, those families are unsheltered. So regardless of which of the four housing status categories that are used, if a young person is unaccompanied and they're not in the care of a parent or guardian, then we also need to identify those students as well for unaccompanied youth, because those students they also are living in one of those housing status categories. So please be sure, if you have unaccompanied youth, to also identify where they're sleeping at nighttime with one of the housing status categories. And just a reminder as well, many of you, as I've talked to you one-on-one individually, we have discussed unaccompanied youth and how to categorize a student as such. A lot of times people think of older youth that are unaccompanied and are not in the care of a parent or guardian. And a lot of times I remind people that an unaccompanied youth could also be a child whose parent is temporarily not able to care for them. They may be detained, they may have had to go away unexpectedly, and the child is now staying with someone, a friend or a relative, temporarily. That student is then considered to be homeless and staying in a doubled up situation or a sheltered situation, and therefore they are not in the care of a parent or guardian, and the person caring for them would be eligible for transportation assistance or other supports. So that would also be a situation of an unaccompanied youth, even though the child may be 10, 12 years old. That's also a temporary living situation where a student may be in need of supports. So I covered this information because one of the most important things that we do here at the Homeless Education Program is, in addition to providing supports to families to ensure that they are aware of their rights under McKinney-Vento and receive assistance with immediate enrollment and other services, and addressing challenges that homeless children and youth may face, one of the other major aspects of our role here is collecting data on homeless children and youth within the district. That ultimately, as the state education agency, OSSE is charged with basically ensuring that we notify the Department of Ed, the City Council, and the other government agencies about data on our homeless students. And ultimately, we often reach out to each of you for assistance with that. And that's why we rolled out the Qlik application this school year. Many of you were able to attend the Qlik application training either in the fall or this spring, and we will continue with those trainings as well to ensure that everyone is trained. So one of the things that we're going to be doing after the webinar is we will send out a survey to just inquire about how many of you will be continuing on next school year in your role as the LEA homeless liaison or the school-based homeless liaison, and how many of you may be 12-month employees that will be around this summer. Those of you that are 12-month employees and you did not receive Qlik training and you are interested in receiving Qlik training, then we can absolutely have a training this summer for you all so that everyone's on the same page and ready to roll in the fall. What we will be doing is we will have additional Qlik trainings in the fall as well, so that others that were not able to receive the training this school year or during the summer can take advantage of that opportunity. What I will be doing at the end of the presentation is we'll send out the handouts and PowerPoints for today's webinar, and I will include the Qlik guide, user's guide in that. So those of you that did attend the training earlier this school year and would like to freshen up on what you learned, you can use the user's guide to guide you through that process. The reason why I'm bringing all of this up is because last year we were kind of in a predicament where we were sharing with you all and throughout this school year how vital it is for you to update the nighttime residency of your students as you go along through the school year. Although we have set it up where many of your student database systems are feeding into the databases of QuickBase and Qlik, the housing status categories and the housing status of your students as you identify them as homeless, one of the greatest challenges that we're having is still many schools are not providing the nighttime residency of the students through the feed. And so therefore, we absolutely need you to manually add that data in. So last year, this time, we had the same issue, and we were sharing that with you all. And unfortunately, still many schools did not enter that data in. And so towards the end of last year, calendar year, everyone was scrambling trying to enter that data in because so much information was missing. So this school year, we're kind of in the same situation, although we have shared throughout the school year how important it is to continue to update that data. At this point, we now have 64 schools that still have quite a bit of student data missing as far as the nighttime student residency in particular. So Tasheen and I will be emailing each of you after the training to let you know how many students are missing nighttime student residency for various campuses. But yeah, we have a total of approximately 630 students that are missing the nighttime residency in the database system, and we absolutely need this information. So that will be one of the things that we need you to do before the school year ends. And I know that many of you are on a countdown. Your laptops, your computers will be packed up sometime next week. So please, I know you're super busy, but if you can, you or someone in your school, if you can enter that data into the QuickBase application as we reach out to you, that would be excellent, because if you don't, then whoever is in that role next year will be scrambling trying to figure out what the nighttime residency status was for all these students that they may or may not be knowledgeable of. So it's truly vital for us to have that information from you all now before you leave your respective schools for the summer. So in sharing that, what I wanted to do is also, just as a reminder, I know again some of you have reached out to us over the last week or two as you've received the information about missing student nighttime residency. Many of you have reached out, so I just wanted to go ahead and go over very quickly in the McKinney-Vento QuickBase application where this information is showing up. So if you're in your current year homeless roster on the home screen in QuickBase, you'll see the list of students that have been identified at your school or for your LEA at the bottom of the screen, and or somewhere on the home screen. Ultimately, what you're going to look for is, as you see the list of students that have been identified at your LEA. So this one is just a sample. It shows Hope Community Academy Public Charter School. And again, this is just fake information. It's not real information. But it's showing, okay, this school year there are 77 students. And then this area where the circle is, the red circle is, that's where the student residency information shows up as far as their address. So even this information, if you have it, it's really helpful if you provide that information to us as well, because again, it helps us track things and report information to the council, not identifying information, but it allows us to give information regarding wards and where our families are residing. So that's super helpful. But you'll see the temporary address here within the circle, and to the left of the circle, if you look here, the nighttime residency status should be showing up for all of your students. If it is not showing up, then that means that data is missing in the QuickBase application. So please be sure that that area is filled in. When you are wanting to edit that information, so let's say it's missing, you don't see the nighttime student residency, and now needs to be manually added in by you, then you're going to click on the pencil on the left-hand side of the screen, and that's how you go into the system to edit for each student. Once you click on that, it'll take you to the main screen, and it will show you the student information. So much of the information, like the student's name, their date of birth, their basic demographic information, is already loaded in there from your student database system. When you are ready to enter in the address information, if you don't know their ward, you can do the ward lookup. And this information you can enter in as well. But otherwise, you can also utilize the screen for any information that's necessary. But if you look at the bottom of my screenshot where it says nighttime student student's nighttime residence status, that's where you're going to click on that box, and then that's where you'll enter in their nighttime residency. And if they're unaccompanied, you're going to click on that left section where my arrow is right now. That's where you'll see the unaccompanied youth capability of highlighting that. So you would click on there to identify the student as an unaccompanied youth. The other areas of concern and services needed are helpful as well. And so these things, if you can provide them, that's wonderful. If you don't have time and you don't have this information available, don't worry about it. But this also helps us to determine what supports your LEA has provided or your school has provided for the student. So those we ask that you click on as well. And then additional special circumstances. Again, any of these that apply, you can check those as well. The sibling information is helpful, but again, we're in the final few days for many of you, so don't worry if you don't have that information. Once you have entered in all this information, then you can click the Save button at the upper right side of the screen, and that way it will save all of your work. Then you don't have to call me and say, Nicole, I did all this work and it did nothing. I didn't save it. I don't understand. So please be sure that you save all of your work as you go along before you go to the next screen. If you forget to save and you hit next, then it will ask you again, do you want to save it or do you not want to save it? And that will give you a second chance to save your work. Once you've edited the information for each student, then you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen where my arrow is that there will be a yellow line, and that lets you know that's the last student that you edited. So again, once you saved it, then that's a quick visual to let you know, oh, you just finished with John Brown, and you can move on to the next student. So look for that if you're not sure of which one you edited last. Also, some of you may be familiar with, there's a feature, if you may or may not be familiar with it, where you can edit many students all at the same time. If you need assistance with that, give me a call and I will walk you through how to do it if you're wanting to enter in the nighttime student residency for many students all at once. Then that way it'll save you a lot of time to do the grid screen editing version, but you can edit with a grid. So once you've completed everything, what we're asking is that all the student details are completed by July 7th. Ultimately, the system will be taken down on July 8th, and no additional information can be added after that closing date. We reboot the system, everything is cleared out, and then it starts fresh for the new school year. So I know one of the things that I always encourage people to do is to go ahead and print out any student data that you feel like you may need for the new school year so that you can have that information available. Because I know when the school year starts, some of you want to outreach to your students and your families prior to the start of the school year, and then you don't have that information of who was identified as homeless previously. So please be sure that you print anything out that you need from the system now before it goes down, because once it's down, and I won't have access to that information until it comes back up before the start of the school year. So again, the QuickBase data needs to be entered in to the application no later than July 7th, and then officially the application will close for the 2016-17 school year on July 8th. Any questions so far before I go any further? Okay. I was just checking to see if anyone has questions. Okay, doesn't look like anyone has any questions. Oh, I see we do have some questions. Okay. Some of the questions so far that we have, can we be sent the slide deck at the end of the presentation? Of course. We will definitely send you the slide deck after the webinar. You'll receive that. The next question I see is, what about when a student is added from an outside agency? How would the liaison know the nighttime status? So the information that I just shared about the 630 students that are missing nighttime student residency information, that is strictly from LEAs that have identified those students. That's not from the community partnership referrals. So what happens is, those of you that have gone through the Qlik training, the community partnership is the continuum of care agency for the District of Columbia. All things homeless, as far as shelter programs, any type of housing supports for families in transition, funding for those agencies that provide those services come from the community partnership. Therefore, they are the umbrella organization, and they obtain all data and collect all data that's received from all the different individual community-based organizations that provides those supports. What happens is, when a family attempts to receive assistance with housing through any of the district agencies, they must report information about their children and what schools they attend. If they are then presenting as if the children are in school, they have to tell what schools they're attending. So every month, information feeds over to OSSE from TCP that shows where children that are in shelter programs or temporary housing situations through an agency where those children are attending school. That is information that now this school year we're providing to you all through Qlik. So that's why some of you may have 20 students that you've identified as homeless, but suddenly you found out that you have 40. And that's because there are 20 additional ones that are actually attending your schools and were identified through TCP. Any of those students that are identified through TCP, we know what their nighttime residency status is. Those students are either living in a shelter program, in a hotel motel, some type of program. That data does not capture families that are doubled up and living with someone because they're not affiliated with an agency. So that's where so many of you are really of great support in identifying homeless students attending your schools, because many of them are in doubled up situations and are not, you know, they're just simply off the grid because they're staying with people. So that's where you all are really, really instrumental in helping us identify those students and ensuring that they're receiving supports. So to answer your question, ultimately, yes, those students that are referred from other agencies, we do know their nighttime status. And if you have Qlik access, then it shows you what their nighttime status is. If you're not sure and you don't have Qlik access and you want some more information, then Tasheen and I can assist you with that as well. The next question, just one moment. So the next question was if there are, if the nighttime residency for a youth varies for one of the newly identified homeless students, which I think the question is what is the nighttime student residency identification for someone where they vary from place to place. I would say whatever their most stable status is, use that one. So if typically they're couch surfing and they're doubled up, use that. Or the most recent, if they most recently transitioned into, let's say, youth shelter, then you can change it in the system and put it as sheltered. So whatever is the most recent setting that they have or the most stable setting, then that's what you would use for the temporary address or the nighttime student residency status. if one of the questions was how early can we add new school-based reps for 17-18? Right now, you can't add that into the Qlik application. I'm sorry, into the QuickBase application, the staff for 17-18. But if you know who they are, then please email that information to Tashin and I, because we actually are already creating lists for next school year, and we're building out the QuickBase application now. So what we want to do is, any of you that know that you're going to be the person for next school year, or you know who the new hire is for next school year that will be the homeless liaison, send that to us so that we can go ahead and add them to the QuickBase application for next school year to give them access for next school year. The next question is, are paper forms required that you find in OSSE's website? The registrar states that they need the documentation at the beginning of the school year for the enrollment audit. Is that correct? So for the paper copies of the student referral forms, that is really for you all to use in-house. You never are submitting that to OSSE directly. That paper copy is reflecting what the that paper copy is reflecting what is entered into the QuickBase application. So mainly that is for you all to use in preparation for the enrollment audit. All of your student data, as long as that paper information has been entered into your student database system and the QuickBase application, when the auditors come to your schools for the audit, they will already have a list of all the students that are in QuickBase and Qlik as identified as homeless. So they'll know in advance prior to coming. Best practice is to use that paper copy, like I said, in-house for your staff to use to refer students to your homeless liaison, number one. Number two, if there's any doubt in your mind that the student information may not possibly be in the QuickBase application or in your student database system, is the best practice to attach that paper copy to the enrollment packet, so that when the auditors come in, if there's for any reason an oversight, that information is then attached to the enrollment packet, and they can see that the homeless referral form is there to support any missing documentations. So again, you're welcome to use it, but you don't have to, because on OSSE side everything is electronic. Next question. What do you do when students are identified as homeless for SY 17-18 but are showing up as homeless for 16-17? It says these students were not homeless in 16-17. Do we remove them as homeless this school year? Okay, so if a student is identified as homeless, I'm trying to be sure, Ms. Cooper, that I'm answering your question appropriately. So if the students are identified as homeless for 17-18, but they were not actually homeless for 16-17, please contact Tashin and I so that we can unflag them as homeless for this school year, and we can fix it in the system so that they're not counted unnecessarily for this school year. But I guess I'm curious, because if they're identified as homeless for next school year, then they should have been homeless now. So I guess that's what I'm not clear on. If they've done early enrollment for this school year and they are going to be homeless, you're assuming they're going to be homeless in the fall, then they must be homeless now. So if they're homeless now, then they should be homeless for 16-17. If that's not the case and they're never homeless this school year and they shouldn't be homeless next school year, then yeah, we need to work together to remove that status, and you'll need to reach out to Tashin and I, and we can go one by one and remove them. All right, I'm going to answer just a couple more and then I'll come back to more of your questions. The next question is, I have a student who is no longer at my school, but is still on my MKV roster. Um, he's not in the student database system. So if a student attended your school and they were identified as homeless, that's okay. They should remain identified at your LEA as having attended this school year and experiencing homelessness. That way, if they go to the new LEA and they're enrolled there, but they're not identified as homeless, it still shows up that the student was identified somewhere this school year as being homeless. So Ms. Wright, reach out to Tashin or I. If that doesn't answer your question enough, let me know, and we will address it further. But don't worry, if they have left your school, many students have transitioned from various LEAs, and that way, you know, we'll continue to identify them, because if they were identified as homeless any point during the school year, whether they left your LEA or they became permanently housed, then we want to be sure that they are identified as experiencing homelessness this school year. The last question I'm going to answer, and then again I'm going to come back to the rest of your questions. For students that some of you can't tell if they were added by TCP or if they're carried over incorrectly from last school year, if you do not have Qlik access, because Qlik is really the best way for you to tell how a student was identified. Ultimately, if you see them in QuickBase, all of the students in QuickBase are only identified by your school. That information is feeding into QuickBase from your student database system. So if students are in QuickBase, then the QuickBase application is simply mirroring what is in your student database system. And that's what I've shared with some of you individually, that when you call Tashin and I asking for assistance with removing students, just know that, again, we can't completely remove them. We can unflag them as homeless, so that there's notation that they are not considered to be homeless. But they are appearing in the QuickBase application because someone at your school flagged them as homeless in your student database system, and it fed over into the QuickBase application. The Qlik application is the one that shows both students identified by your student database system and shows the TCP data. So again, if you don't have Qlik access, you didn't attend a training, then Tashin and I can go through that verbally with you to share with you students that were identified by TCP, as well as what we see in the system from your student database system. If there are people that you suspect that are in there by mistake, then let us know and we can assist with that. Okay? All right, so I see there are 3 more questions. I'm going to take a break from the questions and I'm going to come back to your questions, Ms. Hill and Ms. Clark. All right, so again, for the identification for homeless students, this just supports what I was just sharing with the questions. The tools that we've used this school year for capturing homeless student data is, the first step is your LEA's enrollment form. I trust that most of you, if not all of you, your enrollment packets allow for families to self-identify if they're experiencing homelessness. So if they're displaced, if they are not in permanent housing, a best practice is for your enrollment form to show that the parent or the student can identify that they may not be permanently housed. So that's the first step. The second step is that the confidential referral form is another tool that schools and LEAs can use to allow staff or families to identify students that are experiencing homelessness. For next school year, the residential division here at OSSE, for the student residency division, they have numbered all forms that are used for the application, the enrollment packets. So the form, the MKV referral form, is now form number 8. So for those of you that may work with registrars or may serve as a registrar as well as the homeless liaison, just know the MKV referral form is now form 8. Then, of course, there's the QuickBase application that, again, all the data in the QuickBase application is being fed is receiving data from your student database systems, and SLED as well is receiving data from your student database systems. And then Qlik, the comprehensive homeless student data application, the QlikSense application, is receiving feeds from your student database systems as well as for TCP. So those are all the types of ways that we've been using this school year and plan to use next school year for identifying students experiencing homelessness. And again, these are the forms. This is the paper form that on the left that someone had referenced earlier and asked about. Again, this each year we tweak it as laws change and appropriate terminology changes. Then we make those changes to the paper form. So the one for the fall looks slightly different from the one this school year because we've updated, again, updated terminology, updated some aspects. Like, for instance, before, the awaiting placement or awaiting foster care term was on the form this year, but because the Every Student Succeeds Act now has it where foster care children are completely provided for under a complete, concise program, and now have foster care liaisons to oversee children that are involved in the foster care system. Now foster care children and awaiting placement children are no longer considered to be homeless. So that term has been taken off of all of our paperwork, because even if they're awaiting placement temporarily, they still are not considered to be homeless and should be receiving supports through their foster care liaison in their school. So again, the referral form is slightly different for next school year, so please be sure that your school staff will not be using the previous year's forms for the referral forms, because it's not up to date. They must use the new form. And then on the right, that's a screenshot of the QuickBase application. So the other thing I wanted to share with you before we go on to resources and Tasheen share some information with you all is I wanted to be sure to touch on the fact that, first thing, again, reiterating the importance of the entering your student database in your, entering in the QuickBase application, the nighttime student residency for your students, but also wanted to touch on how you should secure your files for the summertime. So if you're not a 12-month employee and you're leaving for the summer, number one. Number two, if you are completely transitioning from your role and will not be the homeless liaison at all, please ensure that any records that you have, if you kept a snazzy, wonderful, concise binder with all information regarding your homeless students, or you just simply have a file in a file cabinet, please be sure to leave all of that information with an administrator at your school and have that information secured somewhere. Just a reminder, again, under McKinney-Vento, all of that information is confidential. Who's homeless in your schools, who has been receiving supports through McKinney-Vento, please be sure that all of that confidential information is secured somewhere and not left laying around, or worse yet, thrown in the garbage, and then next year's person is not sure on what records were kept and what supports are needed. So be sure that you leave that with your principal, your vice principal, someone that can assist with the continuity for next school year, number one. Number two, some of you are still providing smart trip cards. You may even have some tokens left over from previously. If you have any type of fair media for transporting your families, please be sure that that's locked away in a secure place, in a school safe, somewhere, if you still have supplies remaining that have monetary value. Many schools have homeless liaisons, and previous experiences that I've had have gone for the summer, locked things away in their drawer or a file cabinet, and they were broken into and those supplies were taken. And so I always tell homeless liaisons, it's like you're leaving $200 laying around. You wouldn't leave a $100 bill somewhere. It's the same with any fair media that's used for transportation. All of that stuff is valuable. So please ensure that that's locked away in your school safe, and that those supports are somewhere safe. Also, if your campus has a summer school program, as a reminder, during the summer, the same thing applies as during the school year. Students experiencing homelessness are entitled to transportation assistance and educational supports. The same ones they're entitled to during the school year, they're entitled to during summer school. So as long as the summer school program is a program for educational purposes, not a recreational program, but if it's a summer school program that's an educational program, then all of your students that are experiencing homelessness should be receiving supports during summer school. If you need clarity on that or need assistance with ensuring that the summer school staff are trained in McKinney-Vento, then please reach out to Tasheen or I, because all of your summer school staff, they need to be aware of McKinney-Vento, and there needs to be a homeless liaison available during summer school. So one particular person that your families that are experiencing homelessness, if you know that those students are attending summer school, let them know who the contact person is now that they can reach out to for the summer for supplies and assistance. Okay, so let me answer the last couple of questions before we move on to the resources. And if you have any questions on what I just shared, please feel free to either ask them now or you can contact me after the training for clarification. So yes, secure all records, archive all records, have them in a secure place that an administrator has access to, and lock away any supplies. So the last few questions. Just one moment. Okay, there was a question about I'm assuming a homeless status. It says, would that also apply to students who are identified as homeless but report to us that they have been living with a parent since birth? So I'm not sure if that's the adult, if that's the parent that's been living with their parent since birth. Ms. Clark, you may need to reach out to Tasheen or I so I can clarify that. I'm going to take a guess that if you're talking about a parent living with their parent and they've always lived there and they're stating that they're doubled up, again, if someone is in a doubled up situation, they would have had to have lost their housing or had to move in with someone else because of economic hardship, or they were evicted or some kind of way they lost their housing and had to move in with someone else. Then it doesn't matter if that's the parent, grandparent, relative, as long as they left their housing and they moved in with someone. It gets to be a little gray area if someone is living somewhere and they've always lived there their whole life and they're staying there doubled up. That's not really a doubled up situation. That's really something that we need to dialogue with together, case by case, because McKinney-Vento does talk about substandard housing. So let's say someone has always lived with a parent, and there are 10 people living in a 2-bedroom house, then that might be a homeless situation, because then that would be substandard living conditions. So that's a very great area that, again, I can talk to you one-on-one about. I don't know if that makes it more confusing, but yeah, either way, you should reach out to us, Ms. Clark, if you have additional questions, or anyone else on the webinar, and we'll be glad to add clarity. Next question: if a family moved from a hotel to a transitional to transitional housing, is the family still considered homeless? So if a family moves from a hotel to transitional living program, it is still considered a temporary situation. If the program is a transitional living program, then it is a program where they're only living there for another year or two. Typically, transitional living programs maximum last for 2 years, and it's still considered a shelter because they have to follow the rules. If they don't, then they have to leave the place, the program. So it is a program where they have supports. It is not a situation where it is, many of our families are transitioning from shelters directly into permanent supportive or rapid rehousing programs. So if you receive letters from families this school year saying that they have moved into a rapid rehousing program, those are permanent housing placements. Even if it's subsidized 100%, it works like Section 8, because the family gradually, they as time goes on through the next year, they are being responsible more and more financially for their housing. So it may start out where the city is paying 100% or 75% of the rent, and then as the year progresses, then the city pays less and less and less of it until that family is paying full rate for whatever the rent is for that apartment. Unfortunately, some of our families then become homeless again because they can't afford market rate value for an apartment. But until that time, they are considered to be permanently housed. If they transitioned into rapid rehousing this school year, they were afforded the rights to receive additional support for the rest of the school year, but in the fall, they are no longer considered to be homeless. So that's why any of you that are going to be the homeless liaisons in the fall, you must, and those of you that are not going to be the homeless liaisons, please convey this to your administrators, that all homeless liaisons must confirm the housing status of all of their identified homeless families at the beginning of the school year, because some of them move and become permanently housed before school opens. If so, they are permanently housed. Once school opens and they are in rapid rehousing or permanent housing, they are no longer considered to be homeless and are no longer able to access McKinney-Vento eligible supports. So I can't reiterate that enough, because again, it is something that you can't then unmark them as homeless later in the school year if you then have them start the school year out as homeless, but then they'll be entitled to homeless supports for the whole school year. Next question, just for clarification, if a student was not identified as homeless at the beginning of the school year and are identified as homeless for SY 17-18, which means that they are homeless now, they should remain on the database for this school year and school year 17-18. If they were never homeless, we should contact you. Correct. Correct, Ms. Cooper. So again, if the student was not identified as homeless at the beginning of the school year, no, I'm still confused. If a student was not identified as homeless at the beginning of the school year, but they're identified as homeless for SY 17-18, they're homeless now. So they need to be homeless. You need to identify them as homeless now. So throughout the school year, students will identify as homeless up until the end of the school year. So someone could literally come to you this week with only 5 more days of school and say, I'm homeless. You are charged with identifying them as homeless in your database system. It doesn't matter when in the school year they became homeless. They should be identified as homeless as soon as you know. So it doesn't matter whether it happened at the beginning of the school year or the last month of school. Students are transitioning and becoming homeless all the time. So if they're identified during early enrollment as homeless for next school year, then they're homeless now and therefore should be in your system as homeless for this school year. Next question, if a family became housed recently and won't be under McKinney-Vento next year, we offer them support in the summer. Yes. So the summer school programs are considered to be part of this school year, SY 16-17, and therefore the family should receive support this school year and this summer. The reset happens after summer school, and then for next fall they would not be eligible for any supports whatsoever because they became permanently housed this school year. So yes, the student would be eligible for supports, field trips, anything else that you have that all students are able to access. They would be eligible for to receive those supports now, and for the summer school. Last question, is there a date to confirm by? Mr. Tyler, I'm not sure what that means. So again, the information, oh, maybe you mean in the fall. As soon as possible. So some of you are on staff at the beginning of the school year before school starts. And so homeless liaisons that are in schools before the school year starts, I would recommend starting that process within a week or two before school even opens. Hi, I just wanted to check in with you and make sure that you know, you're aware that I'm the person that's providing support to families in transition. We just wanted to check and see if there are any supports that you need for the new school year and to confirm your housing status. Are you still in such and such program? Are you still at this address? Has anything changed? And then that way when the school opens, you'll know. Ultimately, the drop dead date to know whether or not families are homeless this school year would be the student residency date, and I think that's October 5th. So whatever the end-all date is for entering your data as far as who your families are that are homeless is the student residency date of October 5th. But again, you'll save yourself a lot of heartache and a lot of financial resources if you find that information out early on. Before the student residency date. One more question popped up, and then I'm going to have Tasheen continue with the webinar. Last question is, can doubled up families reside in Maryland and attend a DC school? If so, when verifying their student residency, the school can accept a Maryland address. So yes, if a family is doubled up in Maryland, they are still considered residents of the district. They can be doubled up in Maryland, Virginia, or DC, as long as they originally were DC residents and lost their housing and had to move to Maryland. Ultimately, as I share in various trainings, you cannot, when you're trying to confirm and verify their residency, you cannot do home visits for homeless students. That is highly frowned upon under federal regulations, because you then jeopardize their housing if you show up at their door, knocking on the door, trying to confirm that they are staying at that address with so-and-so. You jeopardize their housing, you jeopardize the person's housing that they're staying with, and you then potentially have two families that are displaced because you brought attention to these people that may or may not be permitted to stay at that address. If you ever suspect that there is student residency fraud, where people are fraudulently claiming, please feel free to reach out to the fraud tip line and report it if you think that someone is legitimately not homeless and are claiming to be district residents and are living somewhere they're not supposed to be living. So please be sure to utilize that. In the interim, fill out the homeless referral information and fill it out in QuickBase, and you can ask for any supporting documentation showing that they lost their housing. But if they never turn it into you under McKinney-Vento, there's nothing you can do. You can ask for it, but you just fill out the forms to support the fact that they have been identified as homeless. Okay, if you have additional questions on that, then I can answer that more. Raquel, I see your question. I'm going to come back to it so we can continue with the resources. Let me come back to your question about the doubled up again. So I'm going to hand it over to Tasheen. He's going to talk about resources, and then we'll answer some more questions before we close out. Thank you so much for your good quality questions. I hope that those of you that didn't have questions find it helpful to hear from your peers as far as some of the challenges they're facing and need clarity on. All right, just one quick pause as I hand it over to Tashin. Thank you so much.
All right. Good morning, everybody. How's it? I hope everyone's feeling well and enjoying this great weather. Thank you for participating with us. Just wanted to continue on with resources that you can access through um, either online supports, phone supports, in person, and these can be for your families as well as partnerships. So first, we want to just recognize that when dealing with unaccompanied youth, there are housing supports that can be accessed. And Sasha Bruce, Covenant House are two of the most consistent places that are often referred to, where they can provide emergency shelter, transitional living and housing, clothing, tutorial access. Sometimes if they just need somewhere to go shower or just handle some employment references, these two sites are most commonly referred to that can accommodate youth. They also do help youth that are in the 18 to 24 years of age. And then there are some services that also can benefit the youth that are serving under the age of 18. Also wanted to identify a Latin American Youth Center, which also specializes in youth residential programs. They do have educational services, professional social services available, workforce investment. The Wanda Austin Foundation, they specialize in providing support services for at-risk youth of the LGBTQ gender and age range between 16 to 24-year-olds. They do also specialize in long-term transitional housing that goes up to 18 months. They do provide on-site case management, educational guidance, and employment references. Virginia Williams Family Resource is basically your one place in DC where if a family is experiencing transitional housing residency placement, they can go here, apply for support services for housing, whether it's in a temporary shelter, transitional shelter. In some cases, there may be some parents who may be experiencing domestic violence or need a place for a safe haven residency for themselves and their children. They will go here and meet with case managers, do an assessment, and then they'll be appropriately assessed in terms of where housing can be available. Um, and if for some reason a family is not approved for any type of housing support, a family can go back and reapply to qualify for housing support here at Virginia Williams. They are basically the one-stop location for any type of intake services. There is nowhere else in DC that a family can go to apply for housing if they have not already gone to Virginia Williams Family Resource Center. The shelter hotline basically is available on a 24-hour basis. They have a phone service that you can call. There is a van that usually goes around in the evening time. We'll try to identify any families that are on the street and need a place to go for the evening, and they will temporarily place them for usually a night's residency. The Homeless Shelter Directory basically is an online multi-service feature, provides a list of shelters and other resources that families can access, as well as provide some resources that may provide some services for support, where it may be employment, financial, housing, daycare, food, clothing, and some other professional supports. The Capital Area Food Bank has been referenced many times during our trainings for with you guys. They also provide a network for food resources. If you use the link there that's provided with Aunt Bertha, it'll provide you basically as close to as close to a permanent address in terms of identifying a food network or some type of resource. Bread for the City and Some Others May Eat have been longstanding nonprofit organizations that also provide resources for food, clothing, social services, and maybe some medical assistance as needed. Strong Families, DHS is also a place that families can be referred to for any type of social services, case management, for community and food resources. The DC Low Income Home Energy and Assistance Program. If a family is in need of assistance for making sure the utilities is paid or kept up to date, so they are not in danger of living in an environment that is inadequate. The Interfaith Conference on Metropolitan Washington's Emergency Services Directory. It's another online resource, provides a variety of resources for emergency contact of food, shelter, health services in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. The Greater Washington Urban League provides assistance with helping people with food and assistance, utility for their residency, any other social services that is available. Catholic Charities is another site that provides rental and utility assistance in terms of just home living. A Wider Circle is a more recent resource that we've come across that provides basic need items to families that are in transition with housing. They do provide the essentials of apartment living or home living. There is wraparound support, workforce development. They also can provide professional attire and parenting resources for pregnant teens and some wellness resources. The other thing about A Wider Circle is that with furniture resources, folks would have to go to the location to actually pick up the items that would be provided for them. They do not deliver. For summer programming, we've identified a couple of resources within the city that will provide some programs for youth, and there are some adult-based programs that are available. So you usually have a bunch of youth who are probably not attending summer school, or they may be on the wait list. There may be some families, as they're experiencing their transition, are trying to find some programs and activities that keep their kids occupied while they're trying to secure housing, secure employment, or some other resources. Department of Parks and Recreation have been longstanding, providing summer programs through their different resources and community sites. So here you have a list, their website, which provides a list of all their sites that are providing services. They will tell you what age or appropriate programs are available. They would also let you know if there's a fee involved. Usually the DPR sites are also free food providing locations, so students can go in there and access breakfast and lunch. DC Public Schools have a summer learning program. Basically is 5 weeks, and they are able to access summer school in terms of academic learning. There's usually after school resources available, which they would need to sign up for. And then again, there are free free feeding sites as well. So you can research the DCPS site and see what schools are being used as the host sites for summer school. The Metropolitan, the police department are offering summer programs. We provided a link here that will provide the details in terms of which programs are being offered. They're doing a lot of community outreach in each of the different wards. They also are providing a summer crime prevention initiative, which will focus on reducing violent crime, removing illegal guns from the neighborhoods and streets, and holding repeat violent offenders accountable. So please visit their site and see what community activities are being featured for the summer. So a couple of sites that are being offered, a couple of programs that are being offered for summer opportunities. We've identified some of these you may remember from last year. So just wanted to highlight what activities they are being offered. Head First is a camp that provides programs for early childhood up to children of high school age. They do offer 3 locations for pickup at Capitol Hill, the Mid-City area on 13 S Street, and then Union Market on 5th Street Northeast. And they will transport kids back and forth to their summer program locations. They do offer after-school activities, so you will need to visit the website and see what sites have availability for children. Mad Science of Washington, D.C. is a science-based program usually located in different school sites as well as recreation centers. It is a fee-based program as well, but they do provide enhancement activities for science and STEM learning. The Digital Media Academy is at George Washington University. That's available for children ages 8 to 17. They have weekly sessions that begin July 10th and run through August 4th. But you would have to look at their site and determine what weeks are available in terms of youth availability, and then they engage in different programs for digital and media interests. The ARC that's located in Southeast DC. The ARC is known as a Town Hall Educational Arts Recreation Campus. They have a variety of program partners on site that are providing summer programs to youth of different ages. Some of the programs do also provide adult programming. So depending on your area of interest and the availability, you will have to have the parents or research the different programs individually to see what would be available. Within the ARC, you have the Boys and Girls Club that's located there. The Levine Music also provides great opportunities for children who are interested in performing arts to sign up and register and participate in different activities where you may have the Washington Ballet opportunities. You may have some health enrichment activities. So again, you would need to research the site, the link that's there for the site, and see what programs are available. For any adults or young parenting adults, or older adults that you may be looking for educational opportunities at the ARC, the Trinity University does have a satellite location there. They offer associate degrees for general studies in the School of Professional Studies, and they do work with families in terms of enrollment and tuition fees. So this is something that can be an option as parents are looking for an opportunity to further their education, complete education, and also enhance their employment opportunities. So I also wanted to provide a listing of the homeless liaison resources. These are legislations through the Department of Education, which are federal and regulatory guidelines in terms of the functionality of the McKinney-Vento laws, what the responsibilities are, as LEAs, school-based liaisons. Also, we do have resources of national agencies that are advocates for homeless youth. These are resources that can be accessed for additional webinars, trainings, conferences, whether out of state or locally within the DC area. You can access these websites and also enhance any type of knowledge, not only for yourself, but your staff, and just making sure that homeless youth and youth that are experiencing homelessness are provided the appropriate resources. Lastly, our contact information, which is available. We can also be reached by phone, by email. We're here at OSSE, 810 First Street Northeast. So if you are in the building for any other additional trainings, we're located on the 8th floor. So if you're available to stop by and say hello to us, providing that we are here, we would be more than happy to see you and say hello back to you, answer any questions you may have. And if there's any additional questions which are coming in, we can definitely make sure that we address those questions now before we conclude this webinar. Okay, so can charter students participate in summer learning programs? Yes, they can. Charter students, so these programs that were provided are listed throughout the city. So they're open to all DC youth residents. And even in some cases with DCPS Summer School, I know that on occasion they have accepted charter school students to participate in their summer learning programs. Now, keep in mind there may be a wait list for these programs, but still it's worth just checking into, because a lot of times students who have already been assigned a seat or a position in a program may not show up, and then those students will be removed from the list, and then the wait list students will then be slotted into those vacant positions. Okay, question. If a family is doubled up in Maryland for school year 16-17 and still live in Maryland after the summer, can they still access DC schools for the fall of 17-18? So if the family, again, if the family is originally a DC resident and they were already attending your school, then they will have the option of attending the school, continuing to attend the school for the next school year, provided, again, that they have not been awarded any type of permanent housing. Can you email the resource list to all the liaisons? Yes, we can. Will this PowerPoint presentation be available for us to print? Yes. Once we send the PowerPoint, you will be able to print that as well. When verifying residency at the beginning of the school year, the LEA Homeless Liaison contacts the family and simply asks if their housing status is the same. Just want to make sure that the families are not required to submit paperwork verifying address. We have several families that have not provided a nighttime residency address. They just simply say they are homeless and residing with a relative or family friend. So unfortunately, in terms of just pressing the issue, we do take the family word and their verification of being homeless. But at the same time, we understand that school records do need to be collected for enrollment process. Whatever the family can provide to sustain their current residency, you just want to collect as much information as possible. Let me see, I just want to make sure I answered the question in full detail. Okay, so again, so Ms. Wiggins, just as a follow-up, unless unsheltered, they should be able and give an address in terms of where they're currently residing. And that should suffice for some type of nighttime residency address. Next question I'm going to, if a family is still homeless but received a voucher a year ago and has not found permanent housing, do we provide supports? Received a voucher. Not sure. So if they're not permanently housed, then they're still entitled to supports. But we can follow up on that as well, Ms. Clay. This student was enrolled school year 15-16, did not return for 16-17. Ms. Wright, if the student didn't return for 16-17, and they're still showing up on your roster, so I just want to get clarity on that. Ms. Holly, how do I remove students who are no longer homeless and has not been homeless for several years but are showing up in QuickBase? Just contact us following the webinar, and we can help resolve that issue, Ms. Holly. Let me just go back to the question about the voucher from Ms. Clay. A voucher is equivalent to Section 8 housing, and then that also results in subsidized housing. So again, it's not permanent housing if they're receiving a voucher. So subsidized housing, they still have to pay some type of rent or something towards the residency. All right, let me backtrack on that, Ms. Clay. So the voucher does qualify as permanent housing. So if they qualify as permanent housing through a voucher, then they no longer receive support for the following school year. But for this remaining school year, they will still receive supports. But for 17-18, they will not, because they will consider permanent housing. So, and they will remain homeless until they will still be identified as homeless until they have subsidized housing. All right, Ms. Wright, they're still on your roster. Okay, so we'll talk later and we'll resolve removing that student. Ms. Holly, her question, I know the nighttime sleeping status of some students, but can I get a temporary address because they move around? Does that matter? Again, as Nicole alluded to earlier in the webinar, if you can identify the most constant address that a student has been staying, and that could be suffice as the nighttime residence. So if they're being doubled up, or if there's a shelter that they do go to, just so to provide some type of data to support the student's residency status. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, I'm going to just hand it back to Nicole for a quick wrap up. Again, we'll follow up with you. Hold on, just had a question that came in. I have a student who's still listed on my AKV, but they are out of the country. Okay, Ms. Edwards, we'll resolve that offline. Okay, another question coming in. If a family is doubled up in Maryland in school year 16-17 and still live in Maryland after the summer? Can they still access DC schools for fall 17-18? Yes. Again, the family was originally a DC resident, and they became displaced for school year 16-17 and doubled up in Maryland. They are considered a family in transition. Therefore, they're still entitled to the enrollment rights for DC residents. So as the year starts up for 17-18, just verify the situation in terms of being doubled up, just to ensure that they have not found any type of permanent residence. All right, and I will hand it over to Nicole.
Okay, thank you so much, Tashin. So thank you also for your questions, and I hope that we were able to provide you with guidance. I know that there are concerns that you have, and they're valid concerns as far as the fluidity between the surrounding jurisdictions and families that are living in areas outside of DC. So again, just to reiterate, if families are living in Maryland on a temporary basis, under McKinney-Vento, there is no time limits on how long someone can be considered homeless, whether in the district, outside the district. So as long as, again, they were district residents, they became displaced, they moved to another area to stay temporarily with someone else, then they still can access DC schools indefinitely. Now again, if your sense is you become privy to some information and it appears that the family may actually now be permanently living in Maryland, let's say the student just happens to tell a staff person, oh, we live at, such and such in PG County, then that's a different story. Then you absolutely should report it to the fraud tip line so that there can be an investigation. But otherwise, no, I don't want you all to feel like you have to be private investigators to figure out if someone's legitimately staying with someone else. Again, as Tashin shared earlier, as long as someone is identified as homeless, they are in one of those 4 status categories of sheltered, unsheltered, doubled up, or hotel motel, then they are considered to be experiencing homelessness and they are to receive the supports that they've requested. Ultimately, that is what the law states. If they receive a voucher, if they move into permanent supportive or rapid rehousing, they are no longer homeless. But they have to have left their temporary residency status and moved into that permanent stable housing. So again, just to reiterate, if the family receives a voucher in order to move into permanent housing, but they're still looking for a place that will take that voucher, they still are homeless. They're not permanently housed yet. So it's like if I give you $100 and tell you to go spend it and you can't find a place to spend it, you haven't purchased anything yet. So it's the same thing with the voucher. If you receive a voucher, it is a permanent housing voucher, but you cannot you're still in the same temporary situation until you actually move into that permanent setting. So unfortunately, there are a lot of families that do fall in that category where they're desperately trying to find some place to find it. But I just want you all to be prepared that those vouchers are good throughout the country. They're federal vouchers, not just DC vouchers. So families can, in fact, take that voucher and go to PG County or go to Fairfax County if they can find someone that will accept that voucher. So that's why it's crucial that you follow up with those families that you know are now headed into more stable housing to make sure that they haven't moved to another jurisdiction or moved into permanent housing by the fall. So some of you that had extra questions that are extenuating circumstances and special circumstances like Ms. Edwards and the student that's out of the country, please call Tashin or I. Again, our numbers are on the screen right now if you want to call us or email us, and we'll be glad to follow up with those questions. And yes, we will be emailing you all the slide deck You wanted the resource list, we can send that in a separate document as well. And also just a reminder, I hope all of you have access to OSSE's LEA Look Forward. If you don't, let us know. The LEA Look Forward, we posted something, I think it came out in this week's LEA Look Forward, where it talks about some of the upcoming webinars that some of the partner agencies like the National Center for Homeless Education, they have some wonderful homeless liaison webinars, and they'll have them throughout the summer. So those are some additional learning opportunities that you can utilize. If you're a year-round employee and you have extra time, then you can access those as well during the summer. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. Again, I know you all are very busy people, so it's a lot to ask you to take an hour and a half of your busy day, but I hope that you found the information helpful and insightful. Some of it, for those of you that are more seasoned folks, it may have been a repeat of what you already know, but such as the resource information, we often give that information to you all, but sometimes it's like a parent telling a child some information and they're not ready for the information. Sometimes when you're ready for it, it comes in handy. So we just want to be sure that you're arming your families and your students with resource information before they set out for the summer, because once they're disconnected from you all, then many of you really are a lifeline of support mentally, physically, emotionally for your families and your students. We just want to be sure that they're okay during the summer until they reconnect with schools in the fall. So we wish you all the best. Again, know that Tasheen and I and Danielle are here to support you all during this time of transition for the end of the school year. And again, you will be hearing from Tasheen and I specifically around missing student data. So either look for emails or phone calls from us over the next couple of days to be sure that we get this data in. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful summer, everybody, and have a great day. Take care.